The door that opens. The email arrives at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Subject: Willowbrook Academy admission decision. David Hammond. David Hammond hasn't slept. He's sitting at the kitchen table in their Newark apartment, coffee cold, because Amara had her chemistry final at 8 a.m. and he'd stayed up helping her study. 14 years of this, since her mother left when Amara was 3 days old. 14 years of being the only one who stays. He opens the email. We regret to inform you that your application for admission has been denied. David reads it twice. Amara's GPA is 4.2, SAT 1520, second place in State Science Olympiad, fluent in French and Spanish, volunteers at the hospital, the kind of student that should open doors. He knows what this is before he reads the reason. By 7:15 a.m., Amara comes home with an A on her chemistry final. David doesn't tell her yet, not before school, not before she's had her moment. At 4 p.m., when she walks through the door, he shows her the email. Amara's face hardens. They're lying. They don't say why. They don't have to. You know why. I know why. Everyone knows why. David does know. He's been black in America for 42 years. He's watched his daughter grow up black in America for 17. He's seen the look in people's eyes when they process the gap between what they expected and what they're seeing. What do we do? Amara asks. That's the question David has been asking himself for 17 years. He calls the school, gets transferred 4 times, finally reaches the admissions office. Can I ask specifically why my daughter was denied? The committee felt her profile didn't align with the incoming class needs. David recognizes the tone. Not hostile, professional. The kind of tone that makes racism sound like policy. Her scores are higher than your average admitted student. Her accomplishments are documented. What specifically doesn't align? These decisions are complex. We consider many factors. Name one factor she lacks. Silence. Then, I'm not able to discuss individual applications. David has had this conversation before, not with Willowbrook, but with similar institutions, with gatekeepers, with people who've learned to say no without saying why. That night, he researches, finds Willowbrook's board of trustees, pharmaceutical CEO, investment bankers, federal judge, real estate developer. Finds their diversity statistics, 67% white, 18% Asian, 8% Latinx, 4% Black. Finds their scholarship endowment, $47 million. Finds nothing that explains why a black girl with a 4.2 GPA isn't good enough. He sits with Amara at the kitchen table. I think they're scared of you, he says. Scared? I'm applying to their school. Exactly. They see a black girl with ambition and credentials. They see someone who might not fit quietly into their system. They see someone who might ask questions. So they say no before you can say yes. That's not fair. No, it's not. So what do we do? David thinks about this, about power, about leverage, about the invisible networks that decide who gets access and who doesn't. He calls his brother Marcus, who he hasn't spoken to in 5 years. Marcus, who made money in tech in Atlanta. Marcus, who David swore he'd never ask for help because asking felt like admitting that one black single father with 2 jobs and a GED couldn't get his daughter where she needed to go. Hey, Marcus says when he picks up, surprised. I need your help with something, David explains. Marcus listens. Then he says something that David has been thinking but never saying out loud. These institutions don't change because they're wrong. They change when someone with power makes them change. I don't have power. I do, and I know people. Let me make a call. Marcus calls Richard Chen, a venture capitalist in New Jersey. They'd worked together years ago. Richard is known for supporting education initiatives. Richard has money and networks and influence. Richard listens to Marcus explain the situation. A brilliant black girl rejected from an elite academy despite exceptional credentials. I have a daughter, Richard says. She got into Princeton. But I remember the barriers. I remember feeling like institutions were deciding her worth based on how she looked, not what she could do. Let me help. Richard doesn't donate to Willowbrook. Instead, he reaches out to his network, to the Henderson Family Foundation, which supports gifted, low-income students, to other wealthy families who believe in meritocracy, to people who understand that closing doors to brilliant young women of color is a loss. Within 2 weeks, the Henderson Family Foundation reaches out to David directly. They've heard about Amara. They want to offer her a full scholarship to any school of her choosing. Top tier, no strings. David accepts. The following week, he receives a letter from Willowbrook Academy. Dr. Patricia Ashford, Director of Admissions, has personally reconsidered Amara's application. They would very much like to offer her a place in the incoming class. Full scholarship, same credentials, different answer. David stares at the letter and feels something cold move through him. Not anger, understanding. Understanding of how the system actually works. He shows Amara. "Did you do something?" she asks. "Your uncle made a call." "Because I'm not good enough on my own." "Because institutions don't recognize worth without permission. Your credentials didn't change, your uncle's network did. And suddenly you're the kind of student they want to admit." Amara looks at the letter, at the offered scholarship, at the door that only opened because someone with leverage pushed it. "I want to go, but I want you to know, this is why things need to change." "I know." David schedules a meeting with Dr. Patricia Ashford. The Willowbrook campus is beautiful. Stone buildings, manicured lawns, students who carry themselves like they've never had to prove their worth. Dr. Ashford's office has mahogany furniture and windows that overlook the grounds. "Thank you for meeting with me," she says. "I'm very glad we reconsidered Amara's application." "Why was she denied the first time?" Dr. Ashford's expression shifts. Careful, professional. "The admissions process is complex. We receive many qualified applications." "So did my daughter's qualifications improve, or did something else change?" Silence. "I think what changed," David continues, "is that someone with money and connections vouched for her. Someone whose network mattered. That's when she became the kind of student you wanted." "Mr. Hammond, I assure you, you don't have to assure me of anything. I understand how this works. What I want to know is whether this is how it works for everyone, or just for students like my daughter. Black students, poor students, students whose parents don't have networks in venture capital." Dr. Ashford shifts in her chair. "Sometimes students from different backgrounds require additional support to integrate successfully." There it is. Different backgrounds. Code for black. Code for poor. Code for not like us. "So your concern was that my daughter might need support. That's why you rejected her." It's not rejection. It's about building a cohesive community. It's rejection. And what's interesting is that now that someone with capital has validated her worth, suddenly she doesn't need support. Suddenly she fits. What changed about her, Dr. Ashford? What could possibly be different? Dr. Ashford's face hardens, the kindness retreating. "I think we've covered what needed to be discussed." "We haven't. What we've covered is that your school makes decisions about black students differently than you make decisions about white students. That you use coded language like fit and integration needs and cultural alignment to say no to people like my daughter. And then when someone with money says yes on her behalf, you reverse course. That's not admissions policy. That's racism dressed up as procedure." Dr. Ashford stands. The meeting is over. "Your daughter is welcome here. I hope she has a wonderful experience." She will, but she'll also understand what that welcome actually cost, and she'll remember that her excellence had to be purchased by someone else's network. I hope that teaches her something important. Amara starts at Willowbrook in September. The first month is strange. She's the only black girl in her grade, the only scholarship student. She's the girl whose father came to campus and made the director of admissions uncomfortable. But she's brilliant, and by October, she's made friends, real friends, kids who value her mind. By November, she's in the school play. By December, honors. David attends the winter concert, sits in the back, watches his daughter in a school uniform singing Bach, surrounded by people who didn't want her until someone made them want her. After the concert, a woman approaches him. Susan Mitchell, mother of one of Amara's classmates, member of the board of trustees. "I know about the admissions situation," Susan says. "My husband told me. Patricia Ashford was pressured to reconsider. That shouldn't happen. Admissions should be fair the first time, so I'm going to push the board to change how we admit students, to remove coded language, to actually mean what we say about diversity." "Why?" "Because my daughter came home and told me about Amara, told me she's the smartest person in her class, and I realized that if we almost lost her because of how she looks and where she comes from, how many other brilliant students are we losing?" David looks at this woman, wonders if she's sincere or performative, decides it doesn't matter. What matters is whether things actually change. By spring, things do change. Susan Mitchell pushes the board, brings in consultants, presents data showing that students from low-income backgrounds perform as well as wealthy students, questions the gap between the school's stated commitment to diversity and their actual practices. There's resistance. Dr. Ashford argues that the process is fine, that admissions decisions are nuanced. But the board votes. New admissions criteria are implemented. Coded language is removed. The school commits to actively recruiting from underrepresented communities. David hears about these changes from Amara, who hears about them from her friends. Nobody credits him. He doesn't need credit. He just needed to know that his daughter's pain might prevent someone else's pain. The final scene comes in May. Willowbrook Academy hosts an award ceremony. The school announces a new scholarship fund, the Henderson Mitchell Foundation Scholarship for Exceptional Students from Underrepresented Communities. 10 scholarships per year, full ride. As they announce it, they mention that it was created in response to the school's commitment to genuine diversity. They mention feedback from families about the admissions process. They mention accountability. They don't mention Amara by name, but everyone who knows the story knows what this scholarship represents. After the ceremony, Amara finds her father. "That's because of you," she says. "It's because of your excellence, and because someone else, Susan Mitchell, decided the system needed to change, and because your uncle had a network, and because Richard Chen chose to help, but mostly because you refused to accept that you weren't good enough." "But I almost didn't get here." "I know, and that's what we have to remember. The next girl like you might not have an uncle with connections, might not have access to networks, might get rejected and stay rejected. So when you have power, you use it. You don't wait for someone to ask. You look for the next person being told they don't fit, and you help them fit, not by changing them, by changing the system." 2 years later, Amara gets her college acceptances. Princeton, Yale, Stanford, Harvard, every Ivy League school accepts her. She chooses Yale, full scholarship, though she doesn't need it. She's worked 3 summers and will graduate with minimal debt. At her high school graduation, Amara gives a speech to the graduating class about the importance of questioning systems and the responsibility of those with power to use it for change. David sits in the audience. 14 years of working 2 jobs to give his daughter more than survival. 14 years of teaching her to question, to challenge, to refuse to accept diminishment. After graduation, Amara tells him, "I'm going to Yale to study policy. I want to work on education reform. I want to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else." David smiles. The system didn't break, but it bent. And in that bending, something changed. Not everything, but enough. And maybe that's what dignity looks like in a world built on power. Not victory, but refusal. The refusal to accept that your daughter's worth requires someone else's vouching. The refusal to let institutions decide who deserves access based on how they look. The refusal to stay silent when the system reveals itself. That's the real scholarship. The one you teach your daughter to give herself.